Well, welcome and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Greg Reich. Some of you know me, some of you might not. I'm the director of the Center for Popular Music, right over there. If you don't know about the center, you're an MTSU student or anyone else for that matter, please stop in, say hello, check us out. Check us out on the web. We're easy to find, or on Facebook or Twitter. Lots of exciting things going on at the center all the time. Today's program is just one in a long list of exciting things, so please look for more things that we have coming up. But I won't bore you with all of that sales pitch. I'm delighted to welcome Bryan Sutton here today as the second installment in our American Guitar series. I'll tell you a little bit about him, and then Bryan and I are going to have a little conversation. I've got some questions for him, and as you can see, he's prepared to grace us with some of his wonderful music as well.
Prepared is pretty deep.
Bryan Sutton is one of the most sought-after acoustic guitarists on the planet. Born in Asheville, North Carolina, Bryan grew up in a musical family and was immersed in the rich heritage of Western North Carolina music. He entered the bluegrass world in 1995 as a member of Ricky Skaggs' Kentucky Thunder. Those of you that know bluegrass certainly know Kentucky Thunder. Playing in that band on 2 Grammy Award-winning records. Then went on to build a career as a top studio guitarist in Nashville. Bryan has also released 4 solo projects, and we're going to talk about at least a couple of those today, and toured around the world with artists like Bella Fleck, Chris Thiele, and also as a member of the legendary bluegrass band Hot Rise. Just telling me he's about to go back out on the road with Hot Rise. Sutton has been honored as a 6-time winner of the International Bluegrass Music Association's Guitarist of the Year award, and he received a Grammy in 2007 for Best Country Instrumental Performance for his duet recording with the late, great Doc Watson, also of Western North Carolina, as some of you know. Bryan's latest album, Into My Own, which came out not quite a year ago, April 2014 on Sugar Hill Records, Into My Own, was nominated for a Grammy for Best Bluegrass Album. It represents a milestone in his career, an album of mostly original material in a wide variety of settings, in which Bryan not only plays brilliantly, but sings lead as well. So please welcome Bryan Sutton. Well, Bryan, I do want to ask you about your early life, your early musical influences growing up in the mountains of Western North Carolina. As I mentioned in the intro, it's an area rich in traditional music, fiddle music, and banjo music, and string band music, and things like that. So I know some of your early influences included your dad,
Right.
Jerry, and your grandfather, Grover, who was a fiddle player.
Yeah. Right. If that area of the country is a lot like other areas of the country where music is a big deal as far as the community goes, and as all that kind of gets wound together, family is a big part of that. So my family was we had our sort of nuclear scene there with my dad and grandfather, and my first guitar lessons were with my dad. But this was when I was 8 years old, but years before that, just as a toddler up through, a very kind of precocious, in-the-way little kid, just always kind of hanging around all the bands, and my dad and grandfather would play all these square dance competitions, and there was also, weekly jam sessions in the summertime. There's this thing that still goes on in Asheville today. It's called the Shindig on the Green. It's every Saturday night between July 4th and Labor Day. And all these local musicians come into downtown Asheville and set up a stage for music, set up a stage for dancing, and kind of put on what's kind of like a Grand Ole Opry type show where everybody gets up and plays a couple of songs. And so, I just sort of was born into that scene of all this music. And like I say, with my family, and then as part of this bigger community of musicians around Western North Carolina, which was Buncombe County and Haywood County and Madison County, all that. If you've ever driven over there, the first county you're in when you go to North Carolina is Haywood County, and most of my ancestors come from there. And then if you keep going east, you'll hit Asheville, and I grew up between that Haywood County line and Asheville. That's kind of where I did most of my learning.
So did you start playing guitar or on another instrument first?
Yeah, my dad was playing mainly guitar back then, but he's a talented guy and played banjo in his bluegrass band. And then when my sister and I started playing, I was 8, she was 10 or 11. She played the fiddle, and so Dad would play the bass. And then we had a friend of ours play banjo, another kid. And so, but just, yeah, being around him as a guitar player, we had a lot of guitar records in the house, not just bluegrass, but Dad's a big fan of blues music, so we had a lot of B.B. King and things like that. And also outside of bluegrass, but still kind of country in the tradition of Jimmy Rogers. Dad's a big Jimmy Rogers fan, so you know, either listening to recordings or listening to him play along with recordings was, you know, that was a big influence.
How much were you aware of Doc Watson as a musical icon, not of that immediate area, but Western North Carolina?
Yeah, we all knew that Doc was from our neck of the woods, as they say. You know, it's Boone, North Carolina. It's about an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes up through the mountains, northeast of Asheville. And in that realm, that's not a large drive, you know, because you got all these winding mountain roads, and so as the crow flies, it's probably a little closer, but just to get there was a little more of a haul. But yeah, we knew Doc and kind of knew that he represented us. That was a cool thing, and so we felt a little bit of ownership. He was playing our kind of music. It's good to say too, I think, that, you know, there's old time music that people look at in bluegrass, and so what is mountain music, you know, is what Doc Watson called what he played, which is kind of a hybrid, really. It's bluegrass songs, old time songs, old gospel songs, old blues songs, but usually done with, you know, guitars and banjos and fiddles and things like that. But it's not so decided bluegrass and not so kind of decidedly old time either. And because he was playing that kind of music and it was the same kind of music that I was playing, I felt a real connection to him.
Yeah, Doc didn't seem too concerned about what all those labels meant. You know, he played all kinds of music, and it sounds like maybe that was the environment that you grew up in as well.
Well, and to get real specific, you know, like old time music doesn't feature a lot of soloing from the guitar. It's a lot of just fiddle and banjo. And bluegrass does feature more soloing on the guitar, but the kind of music we play in Nashville, you would play some more old time type songs, but everybody was a little freer to take solos, and because Doc was a flat picker and lead acoustic guitar player, he was right in there. And so yeah, to have that kind of influence as well, and kind of permission to say, here, you can do whatever you want to with a guitar, yeah, that was a very real thing as well.
Can I ask you to play something that's maybe of a more traditional nature,
Sure.
Something that maybe you've known since childhood, or maybe a Doc Watson or North Carolina connection?
Well, all of that. I don't know about the North Carolina connection specifically, but it's one that I played with my dad when I was a kid, and it's an old traditional fiddle tune called Billy in the Low Ground.
geeky question that I already asked you earlier, but I know everybody else is wondering about it. Let's just get it out of the way. Tell everybody about the guitar you're playing.
Okay, this is a Martin D28 that was made in 1942. It has the Brazilian rosewood back and side, which is common for this model. And Martin made a particular version of the D28 between the mid-30s and the mid-40s that people usually call the herringbone D28, which is because of this trim around the outer perimeter here, is a little herringbone inlay style. But it kind of marked the. They made a model that was a little more fancy than this, but this was kind of the one of the better sounding guitars that they made for that era. And as we've sort of made our way through history of bluegrass guitars, the Martin D28 is kind of the tool of the trade. If you're gonna play bluegrass guitar, the D28 is where you gotta end up eventually.
That's beauty. Let me ask you about the way you approach a tune like Billy and the Low Ground.
Sure.
Because you're playing melody and you're playing a lot of stuff around.
Yeah.
Right. And when you're doing that, are you thinking more about keeping track of the melody in your head, or is it more about the chord progression? How are you keeping?
It's a little bit of both. I'm very familiar with the melody, and I'm also aware of the chord. I'm aware of all that, yeah. But it's, usually guitar and bluegrass is not played as a solo instrument, and that's I like that challenge. I like I like to try to make that effort to remind myself of what the tune is, even though I'm sort of improvising, and it's kind of like jazz where I am kind of working off the changes, working off the melody, kind of exploring different parts of the fingerboard, trying to build lines and things like that, but I'm trying to stay as rooted as I can, and hopefully, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, a listener would be able to follow along with that as well.
Yeah.
And my goal as a bluegrass guitar player, as kind of a player of traditional music, is to always be informed by where I come from, but not be so limited by that. I'm always a big fan of musicians that somehow manage to do both. And I think of guys like Jerry Douglas and Stuart Duncan, Sam Bush. These go on, this geniuses on their instrument and really push things to a new level, but when you hear them play, you're reminded of where they come from, and that's a goal that I set up for myself. So that's what I'm thinking about when I play.
Yeah. It's a pretty good segue into a couple of questions about your 2006 CD, Not Too Far From the Tree.
Sure.
First of all, maybe you could tell everybody a little bit about the project for those that aren't familiar with it. It seems like every bluegrass guitarist's dream project, really.
Well, certainly was found myself in a very fortunate position of having an ability and an opportunity to make a record like this, where I had the idea to record me with all my guitar heroes, and thankfully, just where we were at that point in time in history, a lot of these guys were still alive. And again, being blessed and fortunate to know a guy like Doc Watson and Earl Scruggs. And I could sort of see this idea to actual fruition. And so, but the way I wanted to do this was not just set up a studio and have all these guys come to me. So I built this little mobile rig. That was back before computers got reliable enough to take out on the road, a laptop recording system, so it was an old ADAT, 8-track ADAT, but with good mics, good Neumann mics and preamps. And so I went to Earl Scruggs' house, went to George Shuffler's house. The track that we did with Doc, couldn't quite work it out to get to his house, but he and I were playing the same festival in Colorado that summer, and so we recorded in a hotel room, old-time style, like the way they used to make the old country records. But so that was my goal. Use the same mics, the same. I didn't use this guitar, but one like this, and would just go to these different players. And so it was kind of a journey. It was a really neat story of just, getting in the car, packing the car, going to Norman Blake's house, and just the experience. The real being in the presence of that guy in their element with their instruments, them being comfortable. It was just something I'll never forget.
So you came up with that list of musicians, I assume. Yeah, and I remember correctly, in the liner notes you said the only one that you wanted to record with but didn't get the opportunity was Mark O'Connor,
Right.
right, because he wasn't playing that much guitar.
He wasn't playing any guitar. I asked him several times. I wouldn't let him alone.
But you do have other musicians on there who are not commonly thought of as guitar players. I mean, those of us in that world know, of course, that Earl Scruggs was a heck of a guitar player. Ricky Skaggs, also known more as a mandolinist, fiddle player, but also a phenomenal guitar player. So it was very interesting to me that you included not just the kind of obvious names in the guitar world, Norman Blake and Tony Rice and Dan Crary, but also some of the, you know, lesser celebrated guitarists.
Yeah. I guess that speaks to, you know, the influence that Doc had, to go back to him, where, like you were saying, it's pretty broad musically. You know, he could do a lot of different things, and did do a lot of different things. And because my dad was a pretty versatile listener, you know, when I think about my guitar heroes, it's not just guitar players. It's you know, I've learned a lot about bluegrass guitar from listening to Earl Scruggs do his thing, and the same with Ricky Skaggs. You know, when I was a kid, he was a little more of an electric guitar player, and there are certain recordings that I'm well aware of where he's playing acoustic guitar, and those are, you know, those are really important records for me. And so, in being around him, we always talk about, you know, because we're acoustic, we don't oftentimes, you know, the mic is the only kind of amplification we have. We don't have amps and effects and distortion and things like that. So you talk about the kind of tone that you pull out of an acoustic guitar, and Ricky pulls one of the best sounds out of a guitar I've ever heard.
Yeah, and so much of that is about the right hand.
Yeah, it's the setup, it's the how you maintain that as you play.
Yeah. So since we're talking about Ricky, let's back up chronologically a little bit. So you started playing with Kentucky Thunder, Ricky Skaggs' bluegrass band, in '95. Is that right?
Yeah, summer of '95.
Yeah, and so tell us a little bit about what it was like to work in that band as really one of the most virtuosic of the traditional bluegrass bands,
Right.
Particularly that era.
Yeah, it was a great time. You know, Ricky had experienced this incredible run as a country artist for over 10 years, and you know, was at the top of the heap in that world, sort of in the early 80s to late 80s. And his career started kind of dipping down, he just wasn't working as much. It's like, you know, the arc was on the back end there in the early 90s. And so he was always, you know, looking for something else to do, and it was his idea to kind of put the bluegrass band back together, play some of these songs that he played as a kid. A lot of his diehard fans knew of him from playing with Ralph Stanley when he was a kid. So, you know, it was a pretty natural evolution for him to come back to playing that kind of music. And so when I first started with the band, I was actually doing more session work as a utility player, which means not just guitar, but I would carry in mandolins and banjos and electric stuff and dobros and fiddle, and would just sort of be the jack of all trades on a recording session. And that's what I did with his band, was play twin fiddles with Bobby Hicks and rhythm guitar, mandolin and banjo, and sing a little bit. And so it was just, I was in the right place at the right time. And when that band, the bluegrass sound, evolved for him with that Kentucky Thunder lineup at that point in the mid-90s, I was also playing a lot of electric guitar at that time in the country band, so it just fell to me to be the guitar player, the lead guitar player in the bluegrass band as well, which was great because it kind of kicked me in the butt. I hadn't been doing a lot of flat pick, a lot of bluegrass guitar playing since I've gotten out of high school, spending, like I said earlier, spent a lot of time pursuing a session career. And so I kind of had to relearn a lot of things quickly, kind of get back in shape.
So you're not playing that much of the other instruments these days. You play a little clawhammer banjo on the new album, which was a treat. But correct me if I'm wrong, not too much else. Were you playing mandolin or fiddle these days?
I play a little mandolin on some recording sessions. Usually, with what I do in a session, still part of that utility style, utility approach, where I don't just go and just play acoustic guitar. Oftentimes I do, but I usually have a mandolin or a banjo or maybe a resonator kind of dobro guitar with me, just for different sounds and things like that. Still kind of aware of the skill set of a session player.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've always tried to balance this idea of the music that I played live and the music that meant the most to me versus, you know, the music that I did in the studio, which was oftentimes, a job, more of a, go in and do your gig, say thanks, see you next time. And it was sort of limited to that. So I've been really, really fortunate in my career to be able to balance a career that was able to keep me in Nashville, have a family, but also get out and play some bluegrass too.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you more about your career as a session player, because I know a lot of people here are interested in what that kind of work is like and what the challenges are. But before we do that, how about you play some other tune, whatever you like?
Well, let me think here. Here's one, since we talked about Doc Watson so much. If you've never heard a Doc Watson song, you at least got to make sure that you're aware of that. This is one that he used to either start or end all of his shows with. Called Way Downtown. Well, late last night when Willie came home, well, I heard him rapping at the door, slipping and sliding with his new shoes on. Willie, don't you rap no more. Way downtown, fooling around, took me to the jail. It's on me and it's on my, ain't no one to go my bail. Well, one old shirt is all that I have, and $1 is all that I own. Ain't brought nothing with me into this old world, ain't gonna take nothing when I go. Way downtown, fooling around, took me to the jail. It's on me and it's on my, ain't no one to go my bail. Well, I wish I was down in my sweet Loretta's house, sitting in that big rocking chair, with one arm around this old guitar and another one around my dear. Way downtown, fooling around, took me to the jail. It's on me and it's on my, ain't no one to go my bail. Yeah, way downtown, fooling around, took me to the jail. It's on me and it's on my, ain't no one to go my bail.
I will be mighty proud.
Well, I'm sure you'd be proud to see me fight through these allergies here.
So,
Thank you, Spring.
let's talk about the session work. How did you break into that life as a session player when you came to Nashville?
Right. Well, I would, my first awareness of that job opportunity, that people could do that sort of thing, came from a blend of being a kid, watching MTV, watching the Nashville Network, watching live music on TV. You know, and I was a fan of whoever would be up front singing or playing, but I was always taking note of who else was in the band. I remember seeing Eric Clapton on one of the first Live Aid events, and just watching Nathan East play bass and watching these guys, and I would pursue it. I would learn who they were, and I would see, okay, that this Nathan East, he's also with Phil Collins, or he's with James Taylor, or whoever, and would clue into these side men, you know, and knew that, okay, this guy's getting all around, he's playing a lot of really great music, and that's really cool, and I want to do that. And so it was a blend of that, sort of watching that live music, also going to bluegrass festivals and seeing the same thing, but from guys like Sam Bush and Jerry Douglas. Jerry Douglas has been a very important career model for me, because I would have records that he played on. I would go to festivals and see him play with 3 or 4 different bands over the weekend. And it was around that time, maybe 15 or 16, 17 years old, where I started formulating an idea of what it would be that I would want to do with my life, and knew that I wanted to make a living playing music, and knew that that looked really appealing. I wasn't really sure what that was, but I knew that, you know, I'd done a few little recordings with my family band up to that point, and enjoyed working in the studio. Just enjoyed the idea of playing a lot of different kinds of music with a lot of different kinds of people. That's always been the sort of nugget of what I've been about. And so was also fortunate enough to grow up beside this guy who was named Anthony Berger, who was at that time a pretty well-known piano player in the local studio scene. A lot of what he played was kind of gospel music, gospel country music. But anyway, in my junior year of high school, between junior and senior year, I went to his house and I said, what do you think I ought to be doing to do whatever this is? He says, well, just come hang out at the studio. So pretty much after every day that I could, when I was a senior in high school, I would drive over to this local recording studio in Asheville and just start meeting people, start hanging out. And, you know, sometimes there'd be a little jam session in between songs, and I would jump in and go. And the guys there were really, really nice. And it sort of took me, there was a player there in particular named David Johnson that took me under his wing, did the same kind of thing that I was talking about, that idea of utility musician, played everything. He's a brilliant musician on whatever he picks up. And sort of showed me the ropes, talked to me a lot about not just playing all the right notes, but learning to listen, learning to be a musician, learning to, you know, what it means to show up on time consistently, you know, sort of the skill set beyond just playing good notes. And from there, it sort of helped me really crystallize an idea about moving to Nashville. And so this is, I graduated from high school in 1991, so I was here by late 1993, and was doing a lot of recording around the Southeast. Again, this was sort of still centered around a lot of gospel music: Asheville, Knoxville, Atlanta, Greenville, South Carolina, up into West Virginia, down into South Georgia. I had a little route that I did, me and a Ford Explorer, and a car full of instruments there. But then when I moved to Nashville, kind of started all over again. I knew a couple people from this gospel music world in recording. Knew mainly one guy, a guy named Bobby All, who played acoustic guitar on a lot of great records over the years, and did the same kind of thing. Sort of took me under his wing, showed me the ropes, answered a lot of questions I had about what this kind of pressure feels like. What do you do in, you know, this situation or this situation? And it was really invaluable. And so, you know, that was sort of, you know, 3 or 4 years of my life where I was just really, I didn't really know what it meant, and I didn't know what, there wasn't a book that I could read that said go do this, but through just putting one foot in front of the other and then finding the right people to ask the right questions of, I found my way.
So what would you say is the most musically challenging situation you've been in as a session player or sideman?
I can read music, but I don't read music a lot, so it's a skill that sort of is generally out of shape. And so there have been a few sessions that I've been on where I had to, you know, read, and that's pretty tough. And the other thing is that because if I've been hired to be kind of a bluegrass guy or play banjo on something, and it's written by a Broadway arranger who doesn't know how to write music for a banjo, it's hard to write music for a banjo in the first place. And so sort of negotiating, I just did one of these a couple of years ago, this big Disney production, and kind of negotiating with the arranger, composer, producer guy of like, okay, let's figure out something that'll actually work here. So, you know, some of those early lessons of kind of how to work with people, and, you know, that along with just, you know, playing good notes kind of came back to help there. But those are generally challenging. And sometimes there's been sort of high pressure, you know, moments that I kind of, you know, sometimes I feel like if I really thought about this much more, I could freak out because there's so-and-so on the other side of the glass or something like that.
So is there a typical session for you, a typical session experience when you walk in? And,
yeah.
I mean, I know if you're going to studios or working with producers and musicians that you worked with before, you know what to expect. But suppose there's something that is a little bit of an unknown. Is there a typical kind of situation where you're handed something, a chart, or you're not handed a chart?
Yeah, if you walked into any recording session, any recording studio in Nashville around 10 a.m. or 2 p.m., you would see guys with cups of coffee hanging around the console and whatever the outboard gear is, and a producer will hand you a sheet of paper. Usually in Nashville, this is the way it goes, and it's usually all on one sheet of paper versus, you know, 4 or 5 sheets of manuscript or, you know, standard notation. It's numbers on a piece of paper, and you listen to a demo, And then, part of the session skill set is having, quick ears and being able to hear something once and then be able to basically go play it. And that's a thing that kind of develops. It gets better over time, and that's kind of what it is. That's usually, once it falls into that kind of rhythm, it kind of doesn't matter who the artist is, who's the engineer, who all the other players are. It's kind of the standard way things happen around here, even, from big names to demos.
So is it correct to assume that the extensive work you've done as a session man prepared you for your work as a producer?
The things that, just being around, just like I said, just as I've absorbed whoever it is that I'm trying to learn from, I've watched some of the best producers in the world and worked with them and tried to learn things to do, and watch things not to do, or at least I knew weren't right for me. And so, as I've been in that position to kind of make the call and make the choices, and, I just know that I've got that experience and that lesson there.
Yeah, I want to ask you or talk to you some about your newest record, Into My Own.
Sure.
Maybe we can start that by having you play us something from the
All right.
record.
Here's an original piece. It's called the Overton Waltz.
So the record, Into My Own, the title says a lot, as I'm sure it's meant to. You've done solo projects before this as a leader, but this was something special. This was something new, and there are a couple of published interviews with you already where you're talking about trying to do something other than being someone else's guitar player, which is perfectly understandable. So tell us a little bit about that thought process and why and how at this point in your career it felt like the right time to do more original material and do more singing.
Yeah, it's, as I've been around a lot of great musicians over the years and been in that role as a sideman, it wasn't, it's nothing so much like this urge, like I gotta get out there, I gotta, push this guy to the side and get out there and do my own thing. It's just kind of a growing sort of yearn to sing more. I sang when I was a kid, and I really enjoy it. And I just, I like the thought of it, of being in a situation to play more of my own music. It sort of hit me about 2 or 3 years ago that I just wasn't doing a lot of music that I felt really invested in personally, creatively. That's one of the sort of potential pitfalls of the session scene, is that you play on so much stuff every day that you just forget about what you've done. There are plenty of times where I get in the car at 10 o'clock at night, can't remember a song that I played, my head hurts, and my, between my eyes it hurts. I've been sort of concentrating all day, and it's like, do I really want to do this for the next 10 or 15 years? It feels kind of comfortable doing it. I'm making a decent living. I got a house and some kids and a wife, and it's working, but yet I'm still not quite fulfilled. And so most of the energy that went into this record, and just in general, as my sort of career arc or career moves define themselves, I feel like that maybe I'm moving out of doing the sort of guitar player for hire thing. I'll still always do some of that, just because I feel like, like from the early days, I enjoy playing good music with a lot of different people. But my main goal at this point is to kind of devolve a little more of this personal energy into the balance of it all, where I do feel like I can go out and play my own songs, and I really enjoy that. I enjoy putting a show together. It's just a fun thing to do.
Yeah,
So
so
it feels right.
what do you think is next for you in that regard?
Well, to be specific, the Hot Rise band that I'm with, we put out a record last year and toured the end of last year, and we're going to continue touring